tonight's topic is Citizen Science 4. It's the fourth in the series that Debbie's put together. And tonight we're going to talk about what is science. And Debbie Lee is going to lead us. Debbie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why this topic is of interest to you? And we just had
Sure. Thank you.
Join us.
Since we just lost everybody who doesn't already know me, I'm going to make that part short. Welcome, Shadab. Is that right? Yes?
Yes,
No?
that's right, Debbie.
Okay,
You
all
got
right,
it. You got
good.
it.
Thank you. Okay. So, I am a working engineer, and the name of my degree is Materials Science and Engineering. My other degree is Metallurgy and Materials Science. So I guess that's good enough for me to claim, like that old character on public radio, Dr. Science. Ask Dr. Science. He knows. I know more than you do. Well, whatever. Anybody remember that old show?
Yeah.
You remember it? Okay.
Yeah.
So it was more humor than science, but so anyway, as I put this together, I'm putting together things that I know, but if I'm presenting them, then I have to kind of learn them in a new way. And so I got the idea, but Peter knows I've been wanting to do something on citizen science for many years. And that's because our culture, our civilization relies on science. Our technology is based on science. And yet there are so many people who really don't have very much scientific knowledge at all. So in order to keep enjoying all the conveniences that we enjoy in our modern life, like we have a washing machine to do our laundry, so we don't have to go out to the river and scrub our clothes with a rock or something. We have modern transportation, so we can sit down and be conveyed to wherever we're going. We don't have to walk or ride a horse and get saddle sores. So we have the benefits. I certainly, if I had been born in an earlier age, I would have been dead before I was 1. I had terrible environmental allergies. So definitely I was saved by modern medicine. And that's certainly one of the reasons why there are so many people that exist on the earth, because I'm not the only one that was saved by modern science. So we rely on, yes. Oh, you too? You too? Okay, should we take a vote? Let's see. If you know how to use the reactions, then yeah. So, okay, so science is very interesting, and I did want to show everybody this book, which I just got. I'm about a third of the way through it. It's called The Stickler's Guide to Science in the Age of Misinformation. And the guy's really got a sense of humor, and he apparently has obsessive compulsive disorder. And so he kind of makes fun of himself as he goes along. But the first chapter is about the lungs of the planet. The rainforests are the lungs of the planet. Well, what does that really mean? Where does that hold up as a metaphor, and where does it fall apart? And so each one of the chapters is something very specific, but he really gets into the details, and it's very well written. So if you are interested in continuing your search to have a greater understanding of the basic scientific facts that our society relies on, that's a great book. It's written by R. Philip with one L, Philip Bouchard, Bouchard. So I can give that link at the end if anybody wants it. So science, in a way, I like to look at science as a process. So science is a process that collects knowledge, that builds new knowledge on old knowledge, that looks at the quality of the old knowledge and asks if it's still correct, is it still relevant? Have we expanded our frame of reference so that we can create a simpler explanation? So that's what science does. So for ancient humans, there wasn't a hard boundary between magic and science and religion. The basic way that humans see the events going on around us is in terms of cause and effect. And when we learn critical thinking skills, we can become aware that sometimes we think something is the effect when it's really the cause, and vice versa. So sometimes it's not that easy to distinguish the cause from the effect. However, in general, with our logical reasoning behind us, we say that something that happens after something else in time cannot be its cause. So that's just basic rational logic. If something happens, in order to be the cause of something else, it has to happen first. So as a mystic, I'm kind of a mystic. That means I see the unity behind the apparent diversity in the world. So a mystic knows that time is not really linear. And for example, if you just look up at the night sky, what we're seeing is sensory input that happened at vastly different times. So the light that's coming to us from Jupiter is slightly distant in the past, whereas the light that's coming to us from Alpha Centauri, some star out there, is older light because it takes longer to get to us. So our perception of time, we learn through science, is not correct if we're seeing things as simultaneous when they may not be. So that's kind of a philosophical way of reminding ourselves that it may not always be so easy to determine which thing happened first. Cause and effect are to some degree assumed to be at work when we experience two different things together in time. And we as humans have brains, and we, at least to some extent, like to use them. We like to think that we're in control of our environment, or at least of some aspects of our lives. And so we try to figure things out so that we can predict the future and take action to avoid things that might be coming up that we don't care to experience, or to make sure that we are there when something good is going to happen. I'm finishing working on writing a book on failure analysis, and I have a friend in Greece who is also a materials engineer, and he sent me this artwork with the quote from Aristotle: "There is nothing without a cause." Well, maybe that's true, maybe that's not, but that's what Aristotle thought, that everything out there has a cause. Okay, so a much more recent person who walked the face of the earth.
Hey,
Yeah.
Debbie, I just had a thought. I mean, does that mean that Aristotle wouldn't believe in coincidences and random events, or would those also be justified with, have a cause, and that would explain that?
That's an excellent question.
Great question.
Yeah, does anybody know? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, Aristotle certainly did not take everything that his teacher Plato said. There were things he disagreed with. And Aristotle, he was wrong about a lot of stuff. And his, well, I guess we can blame Plato really for holding science up rather than Aristotle. But I think Aristotelian logic is very linear.
Right. Yeah. I'm just wondering if there's, he attributed a cause to every things that we might consider random or coincidences. Maybe he thought, earthquakes are caused by tectonic shifts, things like that. Like there's always some kind of reason, but I'm wondering if he, if we're saying that there's always, well, what's behind those shifts? Like, is there always an underlying reason? And then is there no such thing as randomness, I guess?
Right. Now, the Buddha lived at about that time, and he was promoting the idea of dependent arising. So causes on causes on causes on causes. People were definitely thinking about this stuff that long ago. Aristotle wasn't the only one, but that's a good question. Did you write that down, Dan? Are you still keeping a notebook? Dan used to be keeping a notebook of our discussion questions. That's a good question for
I used to
follow-up.
keep notes on the back, and today I'm only like half here, so I'm a little behind, but I'll write that down.
All right. So Schopenhauer tried to go into a little more detail, and Schopenhauer said, well, yeah, okay, everything has a cause, or many things have causes. There are different kinds of things. And so in order to how to reason from cause to effect, you have to know which category of things we're talking about. So this is interesting. I just read this before we came online. Inspired by Aristotle's doctrine of the four basic kinds of explanatory reason, Schopenhauer defines four kinds of necessary connection that arise within the context of seeking explanation. So Schopenhauer was a German philosopher, and he laid out that for material things, we reason in terms of straight cause and effect. But for abstract concepts, we need to reason a different way in terms of logic. So for those of you who have been here before and participated in the critical thinking series, we had a saying from David Levy's book, Tools of Critical Thinking, that we're not supposed to confuse apples with existentialism, that apples are things. So if we're trying to determine the truth about an apple, then we have an apple in front of us maybe, and we can look at that apple and we can see that that apple is round, or that apple has a chunk missing, or that apple is green, or whatever it is. So we can make statements about the apple that we can determine are true or false. But abstract concepts like existentialism don't exist in the same way. Like David Levy says, if all humans die right now, there will still be some apples.
Okay.
But if all humans die right now, existentialism is gone. existentialism is a human construct. It's a series, it's based on a series of ideas. So when we're trying to determine whether existentialism is true or whether some aspects of it are true, we can't look at existentialism as a thing. We can't measure how much existentialism weighs. We can't see what color existentialism is. Sure, shut up.
Okay, so just taking the apple example, so I guess, right, the apple is round, and what the apple's color is, those are material things. And but what about, how did the apple come to be? Where, is that would that be considered abstract?
Right.
Like, okay.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that you have to move into the construct phase to answer that, because the first thing you have to do when you ask a question like that is determine your frame of reference. What do you even mean by an apple? Are you talking about the original apples that grew in the Caucasus Mountains, they think? How do we even know that the original apples grew in the Caucasus? We wouldn't even,
right.
Archaeologists say we wouldn't even recognize the original apple as an apple.
Right. Could we though? What about just explaining why it's round? How did it come to be red? Those ideas, like, would those be considered material, or would that still be in the realm of abstract?
I think probably it's both. I think that why are apples round? We would have to get into, well, what is an apple? It's a fruit, and as a fruit is part of a living thing, and so the shape of the apple is determined to some degree by the genetic characteristics that the apple carries. Why is this particular apple red? Is this particular apple red because the genetics tell it to be red? Or is it supposed to be a green apple that's supposed to be green by its genetics, but it's red because somebody painted it, or, something else happened? So when we start getting into really complex things like that, we have to break it down into much smaller steps in order to be able to apply the correct type of reasoning for each step. Almost everything we say is something other than a simple fact. So briefly, the other two things that Schopenhauer, other two types of things, categories of things, are mathematical and geometrical constructions. And, who cares about those unless you're trying to figure out how much paint to buy to paint your apartment, or how many boxes of tiles to get to retile your floor. If you're just a practical person who doesn't work in a mathematical or a scientific field. But psychologically motivating forces, that's a whole other thing. I just started introducing myself to Schopenhauer last summer, and I'm definitely not an expert, but this slide that I'm showing you here comes from Stanford University, and they have really good summaries of many different philosophers. So everything has a cause, but to understand the cause, we must understand what group of things the thing belongs to. So, Shadab, getting back to your question, what is the thing that we're talking about? It's the thing we're talking about, the shape of the apple and why the apple has that shape, or the color of the apple. So now the thing becomes the shape rather than the apple itself.
Right.
and the color. So those things, they're all, we really have to break things down if we're going to use these ideas to understand science. So another big thinker, really the person that many people think was the one who set the stage for modern science to happen, was Francis Bacon. And he wrote a book called Novum Organum, the new instrument. And the new instrument was a new way of thinking, a new method of thinking. And what Francis Bacon did back in the 1500s, 1600s, was really anticipating a lot of the findings of modern psychology. So I have up there a quote from E.O. Wilson, famous biologist who just recently died. And this is what Wilson had to say about Bacon. Among the Enlightenment founders, his spirit is the one that most endures. It informs us across 4 centuries that we must understand nature, both around us and within ourselves. So he was the first one to really emphasize that nature is not only outside of us, that we have to understand what goes on inside ourselves in order to set humanity on the course of self-improvement. He had problems in his personal life, and I'll just leave that at that, but here are his big ideas. At the time that Bacon was around, most people thought that the way you learn things was just to dig out and look more and more closely at the great things that the ancient Greeks had figured out. A lot of people believed there was no new knowledge to be had. Socrates defined education as drawing the knowledge out of the student, that the knowledge was already there. We all already knew everything. It just had to be drawn out of us by the teacher. Bacon said, no, there's more to it than that. There are more things to learn, more things to figure out. And he identified 4 specific things that get in the way of us being able to see that truth. So the first one he called the idols of the tribe. And basically the idols of the tribe have to do with how our brain and our sensory organs are structured. So our eyes sense a certain range of colors, and outside of that range, we don't see. Our eyes see things when there's a minimum amount of light. We don't see in pitch darkness. That doesn't mean that stuff isn't there. We tend to group things together when we see them together. So even if it's a piece of trash on the ground, we might think that there's some important reason that trash is on the ground that goes beyond it fell out of somebody's pocket by accident. So we as humans have certain tendencies and characteristics. We like to see patterns, whether they're there or not. So that's the idols of the tribe. And one way you can understand the idols of the tribe, this is what I was trying to do before I came on. If you go to Wikipedia, optical illusions. This is a good way to prove to yourself There are a whole bunch of optical illusions here. So this is a good way to prove to yourself that our senses trick us. So for example, if you look at square A and square B, which one is darker, A or B?
A.
Everybody agree?
A.
Picture moved. My picture moved.
I know, because I was hiding the answer.
Oh,
But Peter maybe is quiet because I've asked him this question before. So Shadab, have you seen this optical illusion before? No?
I have
Okay.
not. No.
Okay, good.
nor
All
have
right,
I.
so A definitely looks darker. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that A doesn't look darker. A looks darker, but now what do? Now we create, we kind of, and this is new. This is somebody has recently edited this article, because what I did is I copied this image and imported it into Paint Shop Pro, which is like Paint or Paint Shop, and hovered my mouse in this square, and it'll give me a grayscale number, and hovered my mouse in this square, and then they were exactly the same. But so here they've kind of done this easily, and if you look at this odd shape here, you see that A and B are the same color, but our eye automatically lightens this to our perception because we see that it's in a shadow.
Mhm.
So our eyes, our brains are doing all kinds of processing to help us understand what's going on in the world. And sometimes that's good. There's utility to it, but sometimes it causes us to perceive things that are not really there. So there's a whole, that article on Wikipedia is pretty good. There are a whole series of other things besides colors. Let's see. I'll see if I can find one more. Okay, here's another one that's similar to that: simultaneous contrast illusion. So the background is a gradient, but this is all the same color. So again, if you go to this, you can prove these things to yourself. You can print them out on a piece of paper, and you could, for example, print this out and then take a pair of scissors and cut out this strip and put it on a white piece of paper, a black piece of paper. Then you will see that this is all the same color.
That's profound. Wow.
So prove it to yourself. It's good to prove to yourself that your senses trick you, so that you're aware that your senses might be tricking you. This is not the exact one that I wanted to show, but this table, do these look like they're the same shape? The one on the left and the one on the right?
No.
The one on the left looks like it's long and skinny, and the one on the right looks almost square.
Mhm.
But if you do that same thing, if you cut out those little pieces, make yourself several copies and cut out the little pieces, you will see that they are all the same size. They're all the same size and shape. And our brains are processing that information, but we don't have the context. That's what makes it an optical illusion. The context is removed, and so our eye-brain combination makes a mistake. So those are the idols, among other idols of the tribe. Then we have the idols of the cave. And those are the unique filters that we have as individuals by virtue of the particular family we were born into, the particular place and time that we were born into, the culture that surrounds us, all of those things that make us a unique individual. And they help us in some way see big truths in a unique way that can be helpful to humanity. But as far as seeing factual things, they can hide the truth. So then there's the idols of the marketplace, and that just has to do with the problems and limitations of words. Is there anybody here who has tried to express something and just realized that there just aren't words to explain what you're trying to say?
Seems like it's all the time.
Mhm.
Mr. Wordsmith. So there's certain experiences that we have: love, pleasure, pain. How do we even explain them? So those are the problems, problems specific, because words are such a big part of what makes us humans, right? We're the only ones who have the flexibility of expression of thoughts. Other animals may have quite advanced language systems, we're finding out, but don't have the way to express so many different levels of metaphor and reality the way we can with words. But even so, words are never adequate to express everything we might ever want to express. And then the fourth problem is what he called the idols of the theater. So he was really criticizing all these systems of revealed truth, received truth. So truth about religion, truth about the physical world around us. And he says, these I call idols of the theater, because in my judgment, all the received systems are but so many stage plays representing worlds of their own creation after an unreal and scenic fashion.
Wow.
So this is the human psychological state. A very powerful instrument, but filled with traps if we're not aware of them. And even if we are aware of them, some of them are still very difficult to get out of. But by recognizing these issues, we saw that science was a worthwhile endeavor to pursue. Yes, Sam.
An example of idols of the theater. I guess Dan.
You're
and I aren't real
asking-
clear on, yeah, what would be an example that Dan and I aren't real clear on what that means?
So I would say religions. Okay, it's a if you are born into a particular religion, you're given a whole set of beliefs that all tied together. You're given a whole set of facts that you are supposed to believe.
I think politics would fall in the same category.
Politics, exactly. Yeah. And even the science of the day,
Mhm.
right? Because there wasn't modern science in the same way that we have it, with an experimental method that was defined, with a method that was defined, that was a legitimate way to propose new theories. None of that existed in his time. So let's just look at some examples, natural examples of cause and effect. So humans noticed that lightning was often followed by thunder. So we made a link. Lightning must cause thunder. Is that true?
No, they're two outcomes of the same reactions.
Okay, and that is?
Whatever causes the lightning also causes the thunder.
Well, lightning is an electrical phenomenon and thunder is an audio phenomenon. So I think we need air for thunder to happen.
You're talking about for the wave to move?
Propagate. Yeah, for
Propagate.
the sound wave to propagate, I think we need air. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong.
With electricity, I think you can still get a spark in a vacuum if you have a high enough potential.
Yes, I'm glad you said that. Peter agrees. Now I remember I was going to call Jerry and see if he would join us to keep us on the straight and narrow path. Related, but our definition of cause and effect is that one requirement for it to be considered a cause and effect is that one is the cause happens first. So would we ever have thunder without lightning? Could we have thunder without lightning? If we think too hard, we can answer the question any way we like.
Yeah.
It depends on how you define what thunder is.
Right. I think if we take the normal definition of loud noise following lightning, the answer would be no.
Whereas, could you get something else to produce the same atmospheric effect, whether that's an explosion or a speaker system to replicate the sound waves?
Something that sounded like thunder.
It's that tree limb falling on your house.
Or an avalanche?
Or a bomb going off. Gunshots.
But I guess if I may, though, I'm going to go back to Dan's comment, however, in the sense that what he's describing, I think, is essentially the same as those series of dominoes that you used in the illustration earlier. You know, one is the precondition for the next, and so forth and so on. And so, you know, obviously, how can I say, they do have to occur in some sort of time ordered sequence. I guess they probably can't be coincidence in the same way that Shadab suggested earlier, or at least posed the question in terms of Aristotle's position on the subject. But I think, well, I don't know. I guess I was going to offer the thought that we tend to probably not think in quite so broad terms, or such a, how can I say, we don't necessarily apply such systems thinking. Maybe I should put it that way.
Well, right. I mean, if we're just in casual conversation, then, you know, we're in a certain state of mind. But I guess what I thought of as you were talking is, I have personally found that the closer I look at the idea of cause and effect, the shakier it seems.
Is that?
Yeah, so why is that, Debbie? Why are you saying it's shakier than it seems? Is it because our perceptions are not always correct?
Well, I think it's a complex thing. I don't think it's that simple to answer, but I think part of it goes back to when we talked about this in one of our earlier discussions. Okay, so I'm holding my letter opener, and if I open my fingers, what's going to happen?
You're going to drop it. It's going to fall.
Okay, so, but what is the cause of it falling? Is the cause of it falling that I open my fingers? No, we need other things to be going on in order for it to fall when I open my fingers.
Like gravity.
Like gravity. Exactly.
So we're saying there must be likely multiple causes to an effect.
Net forces.
There are almost all, when you start looking at it, if you look really hard, if you do that exercise, you are almost always going to find multiple factors that had to be present or could have been present. Now, what if you look at something and you find out, well, there might have been these 10 factors that had something to do with it. But did you need all 10 of them? Did you need 7 of them? Did you need 7 of them? They're these 7, but if they're these different ones, you only need 5.
Yeah, but you
And
could also
how-
have the pen. You could also be holding the pen like right on the surface of the table and take your fingers off the pen and the pen's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to fall. It's just going to sit there.
Exactly, exactly. So it's a very,
So would it be maybe, I'm just thinking out loud,
yeah,
make more sense to isolate the effect and then study, sort of try to piece together the causes either sequentially or however which way, but isolate the effect, right? So in the, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of the lady that was just talking, but if you put the pen on the table,
Yeah.
right, at the table, you could, if for all intents and purposes, the effect is nothing happens. But in your previous example, the effect was that it falls to the ground. So on the basis of the effect, then we would isolate that effect and potentially look at the consequences, or sorry, the causes.
Yeah, and
Right,
then you
I
wouldn't
mean,
even be able to say it's
See there.
falling. You wouldn't even be able to say it's falling.
You're right, you wouldn't even notice an event.
Right.
right. So, I mean, isn't that what science is, right? Isn't that what science is the attempt to isolate the different factors?
Through tests.
Excellent.
Through tests, I mean, we just gave several different examples of testing it. Without the test, you don't have the science.
We think about it, and it's our thinking about it, and
the inquiry, it's the thinking about it, the inquiry
Right.
and the test.
coming up with the idea that, okay, this pen still fell because I can't hold my surface completely flat and in front of the camera. Okay, so, this pen isn't going anywhere. As long as my hand is holding the phone, is holding the pen, it's not going anywhere. So yeah, it's thinking and seeing the situation from different angles that allows us to isolate the different factors, that allows us to see cause and effect. So,
But it's
if
also
we
it's also repeating. I mean, you just repeated that again.
exactly, that's one of the major things that makes science science, is that when you do it several times, you get the same result.
Or not.
Or not. Right? I mean, if like the gravity wave they just measured with that,
LIGO?
yeah, LIGO. Yes, exactly. We're not going to be able to repeat that tomorrow.
Right.
Right? Because gravity waves like that don't happen every day or every 2 days or every 2 years. So, we like to think that science is repeatable, but it might not be repeatable in our lifetime.
But I mean, isn't science more the study of the cause, though? Here we're talking about an event or a symptom, if you will. This cause, to me at least, that's how I understand science, is that it's a little bit more focused on the cause, and you work your way backwards from the effect, yes, but it's more about studying the causes. So
Or,
even if that event,
or
yeah,
the
so go ahead.
correspondences. I mean, if you can't always isolate a cause, if you're not always going to be able to isolate a consequence or an effect, right? Then you're gonna have to create an artificial environment.
Correlations, right? You
Right,
look,
yeah,
you
so,
start
right.
with correlations.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily causes, it's correspondences or correlations, right? That we're, because
Collecting data.
cause and effect just makes it too simple.
Right. No, I just meant that if that event never occurred later, I don't know if that's in the area of science. I'm just thinking if something does happen, then you can sort of go back and try to figure out correlations or causations. But if
Yeah.
it never happened again, then I'm just saying that, rare occurrence, like, I don't know if that would fall under the category of, like, just because it doesn't happen again, science can't really do anything about it. But that's really got nothing to do with science, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Well, I think it does have to do with science. I think it shows us what the limitations of science are and the definitions of science are, because people make all kinds of statements about science, which I talk about in a few slides, I think, that it's repeatable. But like that LIGO measurement of the gravity wave, yeah, it's repeatable if humans haven't blown themselves up and there's no more humans to do science. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't other beings that can do science and repeat that experiment. Thank you. Peter just put a link in the chat that has a list of gravitational wave observations. So how many are there? You're on mute. Is it a long list?
Many. I can't give you a number.
Okay. So were there ones prior to that LIGO thing? Or was that the first one? That was the supernova or the black hole?
Yeah, I believe it was, how can I say, it began, of course, with the, what do you call it, the commissioning of the device. So.
Okay. So they have repeated it since then.
Well, I don't know if there are, how can I say, if what you're getting at is they've observed the same event twice. I don't think that's what.
Well, right. That's yes, that's another situation, is that depending on what kind of science we're talking about, some events are unique. If you're talking about cosmology, it's different from dropping a pen. How many times I drop the pen is limited by my patience, my time, when I get hungry. So, yeah, I guess I never know where these conversations are gonna go, but I guess I'm happy that we only got to slide. What slide is this? Slide 7 before we are, totally putting into doubt the idea of cause and effect. And I think that's the goal, is that it is complicated. Yes, Sam, sorry.
So Shadab, I guess what I would bring this back to is the goal of science is to separate the correlation and the causation. So you can make an observation from first principles and say it looks like they're related, and then use the scientific method as a dividing tool to figure out, is there actually a strong relationship between these, and if they are, understand the principles. But then there's also the issue of, in the case of Debbie's pen, we can investigate it as what happens when we drop this pen versus what happens when we drop any pen,
another pen or a pen, right?
Any object. Are we looking for a
kind
specific
of
example, or the generalization of what happens when an object is released in space?
Right.
So even if there's only a single incident of Debbie dropping that pen, we can still do generalizations of the principles by making other observations.
Right. And I wonder how much of that we can take back to, and I don't even know if this would be connected, but to Schopenhauer's the 4 things he mentioned, right? Like, could this be a reason, stemming from a material cause? Could it be, would there be a connection there? And again, I'm just thinking out loud.
Right. I mean, and he was very insistent. I did read this, so this division of things into 4 different types of things where you have to treat their causes differently was actually his PhD dissertation. And so it's not that long, and it's available online. You can get a PDF for free. And you know, I'm not going to claim it's like reading the comics, and you know, I've read through it once entirely and chunks of it here and there. You know, it's the kind of thing you'll be studying for the rest of your life because it's so foundational, and it challenges us to look at the world in a new way. And most actual things or events, I mean, so what is this? Here's this bottle of hand sanitizer. That's a thing. But when I let it fall to the desktop, that's an event. So how do we categorize that event? Is it a thing?
By the height, by the weight, by the mass of the object,
The
by the
velocity.
shape of the object. Because you got to know, does it make a difference if the object is vertical or horizontal when you let it go? Does it make a difference on gravity? I mean, somehow or other they came up with a constant 9.8 meters per second squared, but I mean, how did they get there, right?
Well, and of course we have air resistance.
Yep.
And like this, when I drop it this way, wow, it bounced pretty high and it flipped over. But one of the other times when I dropped it pretty much from the same height, you know, not exactly, it's kind of bouncing differently every time. Now, if I drop it this way, you know, so each event, how do you know, that's why science, a lot of types of science in a way have to be studied in a lab. A lot of these cause and effect things, that part, because there's no other way that you can do what we talked about, which is strip away the variables and look at one thing. Now, obviously, other types of science, like classifying different types of plants or animals, those have to be done in the field, and those are also a part of science. So, okay, lightning followed by thunder. So I think we're gonna call this, well, maybe it's cause and effect.
There's a lot of slides in this.
How about, let's look at some other examples. How about alternations of day and night associated with the apparent motion of the sun? Or day and night caused by the relative motion of the sun with respect to the earth?
Hope not.
What do you mean you hope not?
No, I hope the sun isn't moving.
Well, of course, the sun is moving, and that's why I said apparent, relative.
Yeah, I know.
So, I mean, that one, I guess I'm finding a little harder to argue with. What
But if you
about,
go back to Schopenhauer, then, you know, how do you divine those things when the sun and the earth are things, but day and night is a concept or a construct?
construct? Right. And that's why it's so hard.
Right.
I mean, as soon as you start actually scrutinizing anything, what do we realize? We realize what Francis Bacon said, the third idol, right? The limitations of words. Is
Yeah.
that part of what we're getting into here?
Yeah.
What is day? What is night?
Yeah.
Can we not list all the, or as much as possible? So item, things, constructs, concepts,
Right.
right? Like, and I'm only thinking because, you know, you would think that the number of elements in the world are infinite. But then these guys, at least from what we know, it's from a periodic table of, I don't know, I don't even remember, 120, whatever elements there are. So those elements make up the whole entire universe, entire Earth at least.
103 on this one.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Right. So I'm wondering, and you know, if somebody would say that just intuitively, I bet that, you know, you think, at least I would have thought, wait, it makes no sense. There's so many things. How can it be just broken down into? So I'm wondering, similarly, could we just break down all these things into things like, or words like items or things, category, concepts, constructs, you know, like
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, that's
yeah.
what Aristotle tried to do. That's what Schopenhauer tried to do. And there is a guy named Kanada, Kanada, who was an Indian philosopher who lived around the time of the Buddha. So, you know, we're talking 2,500 years ago, who I am not going to say any more about because his system is so complicated that I have to keep reading the book probably another 3 times. I've tried to get through it 3 times. It was actually recommended to me by another person who I met through this church. And I think that Kanada was a genius because he has another system where he talks about things and then he talks about qualities. Qualities are a type of thing, like the color red, the taste of the apple. So how do you fit those in? So, you know, my favorite book, Tools of Critical Thinking, that we've had 11 sessions on now, you know, just goes with the apples and existentialism. So the things and the constructs. But yeah, I don't think anybody's done it. Shadab, there's your job.
That's my calling right there. Yeah, that's my
Life's
purpose.
work.
I just found it today.
Wow. Yeah.
Schopenhauer is just, I'm sorry, I really hope I'm not hijacking anything, but the Schopenhauer's piece is still kind of stuck in my head because I've never sort of divided it into these 4 ways of, you know, the 4 independent kinds of objects. And now that I look at it, you know, when we say material things, all of physics, chemistry, biology is built on what I would think is material things. But even within physics, you have things like pressure and heat, and you know, some of the things you talked about, Debbie, and we were just talking about electricity, right? Like some of these ideas then get to be a little more abstract. So, like, to me, it's still hard to differentiate and say, okay, this is in the material category, and it's not in the abstract category. And at the bottom last paragraph there, it says that his belief was that there can be no overlap between those two. So that's the part that
that's
yeah.
right. And that's a restriction. Because if you start out talking about this bottle of hand sanitizer, that's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so according to him, if you're reasoning about this thing, you can only reason about this thing, and you can't reason directly from that line of analysis to the event that is it falling due to the existence of gravity and the opening of the fingers and not too much air pressure to slow it down to a terminal velocity. So it actually, you know, you start, yes, and I guess the other thing that I have come to grasp as I struggled over 20 years with writing my technical book on failure analysis, which is cause and effect. I mean, that's what I do for a living. People bring me something that's broken, rusted. Why did it break? What's the cause? That's what they want to know. What is the cause? They always want to know the cause. Well, there may be a whole
List of
tree, feeding this cause. What's the one thing that if it hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened? Those are the types of things that they want to know. But the fact is, the closer I look, I see that every system that we create to categorize anything, things, causes, effects, emotions, hair color, whatever it is, whatever system we create to categorize things in some way or ways is arbitrary. So Schopenhauer picked his 4 things. David Levy simplified it. He had 2 things, 2 kinds of things. And I've talked to him and I said, you should read Schopenhauer. And just tonight, right before we started, I sent him the link. So we'll see if he reads it and what he has to say. Because for him, two categories, that's good enough. It's hard enough to get people to even acknowledge that there are 2 categories. Schopenhauer, he wanted 4 categories. Aristotle apparently wanted 4. Canada had, I think, 7 categories. Shadab is going to have how many? Let's take a guess.
6.
I'll take that action.
Maybe
Yeah.
he was going to have 10 or 12.
So Debbie,
Man.
what you've talked about with the limitations of language gets me thinking about, so the concept of, we got to be careful of what we ascribe the cause to, or what we ascribe the concept to, the definition to, or the materiality of the concept. So for example, we weigh ourselves, we step on a scale on Earth and it weighs something. We go to the moon, we step on the scale and we weigh something different. So what that tells us is that the weight isn't necessarily specific to me, it's to a relationship. And I think that's part of the reason that our knowledge evolves, our use of the language has to evolve, because until we could measure, the effects of different size objects, we didn't realize that it wasn't just particular to one person or one, what is the weight? We say, I weigh this. Well, it's more the measure of the attraction of my mass to the mass of the Earth, right? So our definitions aren't always adequate.
And that's what science is. It's helping us. If we didn't have science, you wouldn't even know that would be the best diet plan, is just to go to the moon. You're going to lose 85% of your mass.
And that's also part of the semantic drift of weight versus mass, where weight is your mass times the acceleration due to gravity at your location, whereas your mass is always your mass. And so that kills me. People talk about, oh, I weigh so many kilograms. Well, that's not a weight unit, that's a mass unit.
Until we had the concept of gravity, we didn't have a way of separating out those 2 constructs.
Yeah.
Right?
Nobody-
They're both
nobody even uses the
relative
material unit
constructs.
for mass, which is the slug.
Right. The good old slug.
Well, I guess putting Dan on the moon would also lighten his wallet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Well, we're gonna run out of time, but that's okay. But I did want to. So the point of this slide was to show that there are at least some observable natural examples of things that early humans did take as cause and effect. right? Even if we're smarter and we ask more questions and we have other people who have helped alert us to the fact that these things aren't as simple as they might have seemed. And so those are things that we can observe in the world outside us, but there are other causes and effects that are related to our own actions. So for example, if we eat, then presumably we will be less hungry. And if we sit down by a fire, we're going to feel warm. So this is why this is so important, because if we understand cause and effect, then we can plan and carry out our plans. That's why cause and effect is such a useful concept, even if it's not ultimately true. Because that gets us back to the apples and existentialism. Okay, an apple statement about an apple, we say it's true or false just by an objective standard. The apple is red. Either it is red or it isn't red. The apple weighs 223.7 grams. Either it does or it doesn't. But with cause and effect, is cause and effect a true description of how things happen in the world? I say no. I think most of us have come to the conclusion that even if it's not outright no, it's more complicated than we might have thought about it before. We might have thought it was before we thought about it. But cause and effect is still a useful construct because it allows us to plan and carry out our plans to continue being alive, enjoying life, taking care of things we want to take care of, avoiding things we want to avoid, having that basic idea, like some of our parents might have told us, there are consequences, right? You don't make your bed, then I'm not going to let you do X, Y, Z. You don't eat your green beans, you're not getting strawberry shortcake.
Or if you don't eat your spinach, you won't be strong.
Right, exactly. So cause and effect is it's a useful, it is a true thing. The reason people keep talking about it is because it's so useful. So let's go a little bit further. So humans thought, well, if we know that we can have an effect on the world, like if we pick up this phone and walk over to the other side of the room carrying the phone, we can put it down. So we have our own actions to go by and know that our own actions have results, consequences, effects, whatever you want to call it. Maybe things in the natural world are likewise the result of the will of unseen beings, like the wind, right? We can't see the wind, but the wind definitely moves things around. So then it was just one more step to say, well, maybe we can manipulate these unseen beings to do what we want them to. So now we're seeing layers of nested causes resulting in complex effects. So the point I was trying to make here is that in the beginning, we didn't really have a way to sort out the difference between magic, religion, and science. But what are the differences? So here's one way to look at that. Magic is the attempt to manipulate the unseen beings. Well, religion is the attempt to gain the favor of the unseen beings. Especially modern religion. The modern world religions were encourage people to pray, to ask, to beg, to please the unseen beings, so that the unseen beings will want to bless us with what we want. That's the logic there.
Sacrifices.
Sacrifices, yes.
Isn't also religion though attempt to answer questions that science and other concepts have not been able to answer?
Yes. I'm not talking about that aspect of science and religion. That's the next slide or a couple slides away. Who knows how far we're going to get.
Slow down.
But I think this is an important thing that in modern religions, you know, magicians call down the power. Magicians don't really care if the power wants to come. Magicians try to force the power to do its bidding. Whereas in the modern religions, we're asking the powers to do what we want. So the problem with these things is that without that methodology of science, of trying to repeat things and trying to strip away the extraneous factors that might or might not be part of the cause, humans have a biologically programmed need to see patterns, whether they're there or not. And so magic and religion can both easily morph into superstition. Science is different. Science does not claim ultimate truth. Now, there are some scientists who do seem to sound like they're claiming ultimate truth. Those are dogmatic scientists. They're dogmatic scientists, just like they're dogmatic religious adherents. But in my opinion, the whole point of science is that it doesn't claim ultimate truth, that it's always looking for a better theory, that it's always open to seeing things in a new light, that's closer to reflecting that, so that our understanding comes closer to reflecting the natural world. Science is inherently epistemological. That means it makes use of a theory of knowledge. That means that you don't drop one pen once and say, oh, this is because blah, 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 blah. That's not how science works. Science tries to shoot itself in the foot. Science tries to, good scientists try to disprove their theories.
Right.
Science is based on observable data, theoretically repeatedly observable. It does not require faith in the same way that revealed religions or even magic do. So, we're going to skip, well, okay, we're not going to skip this slide. All right, so here's this quote from Darwin. I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of God. So here's a scientist who says, I don't deny the existence of God. I think that generally an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind. So what does that mean? That I think what he means is that He's acknowledging there's no way to prove that God does or doesn't exist to someone who believes the opposite. That's what agnosticism is. That you acknowledge there's no way to prove it one way or the other. So he has scientific theories that he's developed based on evidence, maybe not complete proof, but evidence. But he understands that there's no argument. Every argument has been tried to convince people who don't believe in God to believe in God, and to convince people who do believe in God not to believe in God. And guess what? Do they work?
No, in fact, most of the time it ends up making them further entrenched in their existing beliefs.
So, I mean, people have been having these arguments for at least 3,000 years.
And I think one of the main advantages, or the I would say the power that science has over religion is that it's open to, it doesn't, like you said, it's not dogmatic. It is open to new data. It is open to new, so it can update itself. It can present a new understanding that's closer to reality. And whereas the other one is a little bit, no comment. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, that's, I think, the advantage that science has. How would you, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
So I'm just wondering, science and logic, because we talked about logic earlier on, and I do get mixed up between these two a bit. And from what I understand, logic is supposed to be a more precise, whereas logic is sort of, almost considered mathematical, where 2 + 2 is always 4.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're interested, Dan, I'm pretty sure we recorded our session on logic. And the guy who wrote this book, David Levy, he joined us for that discussion.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you're interested in watching that, I think we can make that happen.
Okay. Okay.
So that's all I want to say now, just because it's a whole,
it's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But this is a point as we're coming toward the end here, I did want to make this point, which is that science is about how and what, right? That was Darwin's contribution. How did we end up with all these different kinds of finches? How did we end up with all these different kinds of fossils? He actually was trained as a geologist. So how? Facts are primary. The purpose of science is to discover facts and propose or build theories, and then to work to disprove or prove them, prove or disprove them. That's what science is about. Now, I have a bunch of other engineers that I know for sure on this group, so I just made that up. I did not get that from a dictionary or another website. And Shadab, you're new, so I don't know what you do for a living. So, but I would like to hear whether anybody thinks that this makes sense to them.
Well, one distinction for me is that you said the purpose of science. You didn't say science is. You said the purpose of
right,
science.
Yeah.
You didn't say science is to discover.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah, I mean, so there's an operational situation there that gives it a different context for me, and so that's what I'm noticing.
Okay, so religion is about explaining the whys that we can't figure out on our own, and like Dan's document, the distinctions of the conscious church say, when religion first started 30,000 years ago or more, there were a lot more things that we didn't know and we couldn't figure out on our own because we didn't have the built up history of knowledge that we have now. So religion provided explanations. People used their imagination to explain the whys that we couldn't figure out on our own. But the purpose of religion is always to preserve the group and the hierarchy within the group, if there is one. Facts are secondary to religion.
And to me, what you've said by saying purpose here and even capitalizing it is like, it sort of humanizes it for me. It's like, it's like applied science or applied religion. This is how you apply it to your human existence. This is how you apply it, whatever. I mean, that's how it's, that's how I'm getting it.
Thank you for saying that. And again, going back to chapter 2 of David Levy's book, Comparing Apples and Existentialism, science and religion are constructs. And how are we to evaluate constructs? Not by facts, but by their utility.
Hello. Yeah.
Science is useful because it's useful.
Because you can
religion, religion continues to exist among humans because it's useful. It serves purposes. That's its truth. If you can't preserve a group or a culture, then you have worse problems. Right? You know, if there's a complete breakdown in the ability of people to get along, you can't make new progress. You can't apply, you know, if there's just chaos, you're not going to get anywhere. So yeah, so we're about halfway through. So I guess we're going to have to do Citizen Science 05 is going to be part 2 of Citizen Science 04. Because we're at our end time, but if you read fast, then you can get a preview of what I might have to say next time. And if anybody hasn't looked in the chat, there's some links there. And if anyone wants the links, if you can tell me if I have your email, if you're a new person, if you want the links, Shadab, you're the new person. You're the only one I don't have email for. You can either give me your email, or if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can leave me a note in the meetup group, which hides your email from me, and I'd be happy to send it to you.
I'm sending it to you right now.
Okay.
On text.
All right.
So we do have a channel on YouTube, and we put some stuff out there. I don't remember what. I know that some of the I don't think any of the weddings we've done are out there on YouTube, but a couple of the memorials that we've done are out there. And the goal is to get these classes and stuff put out there. At this time, when we put them out, they're going to be pretty much unedited because we don't have anybody volunteering to do that at this point. So when we put them out there, we'll find a way to put the title and what the topic is on it. So
I have some of them in a Dropbox account, so you can download them and watch them if you can get it. It's free to get a Dropbox account. So
okay.
So like the one on Logic, if you're interested in that one, Shadab, I can send you the link. So